We are pleased to be joined in studio by the Senate Majority Leader Jack Johnson, who obviously joins us not to just talk about summertime and the start of football season, but we have a few other more. I wish, maybe you, I don't know. Should we wish that that's what we were talking about? I mean, it is what it is.
I will say this. I bought a whole slew of University of Tennessee volunteer football tickets yesterday, actually. So I am getting ready for football season, and I have a son at UT, so it's a kind of a dual purpose. I get to go see my son, and we go to a football game.
This is where I start being nice to Jack Johnson, recognizing that my beloved Georgia Bulldogs will be coming to. I'm going to that game.
And I bought tickets.
I'm going to that game.
That's one you can't miss.
It will be my first experience at Neyland Stadium. I'm excited about getting over to Knoxville to Neyland Stadium. Should be a lot of fun.
100,000, 103,000 people, whatever it is. It is a massive place.
It is. I've seen it from the interstate. I've seen it from the river. I've never seen it from the inside. So we'll hopefully it'll be a good place both before, during, and after the game. Yes. I know that many Tennessee Volunteers don't want me to say that, but anyway.
Well, I participate in a tailgate at Circle Park there where they have a tent or something, so I'll make sure you get an invitation to stop by the...
I bet the Jack Johnson tailgates are as wild as they come.
It's not mine, but I do participate in it, so we'd love to have you stop by.
Oh, boy. I bet a Jack Johnson
the cops
tailgate...
have ever been called on that thing?
You know what? Did you see that thing that happened in Montgomery on the river down in Montgomery? I bet it's kind of like that, right?
No. It's a bunch of old guys like me sitting around getting ready for the game. It's kind of boring.
Sitting around talking about General Neyland. Well, we have heard about this all summer. We've talked about it all summer. The governor his office indicated to us some weeks ago. I asked a question of one of his folks. I said, "Is this happening 100%?" And she looked at me and said, "100%." And here it is. Your initial thoughts?
Well, yesterday was a big day, and we've talked about it, and you've talked about it a lot on your show, and others have as well. Yesterday was a big day because we got the call, and I'm using air quotes there, and the call is very important when you're going to have a special session. The governor has the constitutional authority to call us into special session for what are referred to as specific and extraordinary circumstances, and he gets to determine what those are. And in that call, he lays out what can be contemplated, what can be considered, the subject matter that can be discussed, or bills that can be filed during the special session. We received that yesterday. You've been talking about it. We've been reviewing it, going over it. We've had lots of conversations with the governor and his staff, so we now know what we can talk about.
Why is that important? Help us laymen understand the process, how a special session differs from the general session.
Sure. When we convene in January for our regular session, is how we would call that, a regular session of the General Assembly, any member can file any bill about any subject. If you're a member of the House and a member of the Senate, and you can get a Senate sponsor and a House sponsor, you can file a bill on just about any subject matter that you want, doing about anything that you want. Not so in a special session. That the call, as we keep referring to it, is typically very narrow, and this has more items on it than most calls for a special session. So there are a lot of things. You've been talking about them on the show, and your listeners can go and pull it up and actually read it for themselves if they want. But now this special session that will convene at 4 p.m. on August 21st, we can only deal with things that are articulated in this call.
Are there, and I read a good portion of the call as presented by the governor. I did not read all. I guess there are 18 specific issues or items brought up by the governor. Do you, as a General Assembly, get more specific language as to what you can do with those point-by-point items, or is it left up to you to determine which way to go in terms of drafting legislation?
Sure. So this call was precipitated largely by the governor and issues that he would like to address in the special session. So these would be things that the governor would like to see done. But he is also, as you know, he's been meeting and conferring with members of the General Assembly for the last several months. And they have been bringing up ideas and things that they think are important to be considered during the special session. And so this call reflects not only issues that the governor would like to see brought forward, but also things that members have approached him about that they would like to see addressed. So when you go through the 18 items that are there, some of those are addressing initiatives that the governor feels passionately about, and some of those are from members.
And I'm not trying to call an organization like the Tennessee Star out, but I'm going to mention them because I saw a headline earlier today that, I kind of scratched my head and thought, well, that's what we fight against on a regular basis. And once again, maybe it's just an oversight, but the headline said, hey, finally we've got the call to go into special session regarding red flag laws. And after reading this, I thought, well, that's not – I understand the order of protection is still in there as one of the 18 points, but this more broadly truly is dealing with public safety in the aftermath of Covenant. And I heard in talking with the governor, he said that he felt like the atmosphere was too emotional and too hot, and that's my word, not his. I don't think he used that word. It was too emotional in the waning days and weeks in the aftermath of Covenant in the General Assembly. And that's one of the reasons that he felt it important to go ahead and get this done, that we could deal with issues of public safety. And he indicated, he said, look, we can have a discussion about order of protection. I'm under no illusions as to where a lot of the members of the General Assembly are on that matter.
Including me.
Right. So I appreciate the fact that he broadened the call out to include all aspects of public safety and maybe getting a few things done that you weren't able to get done at the end of the session.
Right. And you explained that well. So the governor, if you listen to what he has said publicly over the last several months, he has said he wants a special session relative to public safety. Now, the one component of that a lot of people have talked about, including me, was the order of protection component. And I do not support that particular bill, and I don't think it has any chance of passing. The governor did include it in the call. It is not included as one of his initiatives, interestingly, though, that he wants to introduce it as an administration bill, but it is in the call. But it's the session is not limited to that one issue. And frankly, I say with a great deal of confidence that the order protection bill has zero chance of passing. It probably will be introduced in the Senate. I don't think it'll be introduced by a Republican. It might be introduced by a Democrat, but it has, again, zero chance of passing. But there are a lot of other things in there relative to public safety that I think we will have some conversations about.
What structurally, when this happens on the afternoon of August 21st, we anticipate that some Democrats, because they're very vocal in their opposition to anything having to do with anything that doesn't have to do with grabbing our guns. What can and can't they do with this session? Because there are some concerns by Tennesseans that they might try to subvert it or stymie it. I'm not talking about the protest outside. I'm talking about the Democrats inside. What can and can't they do?
So any member of the General Assembly, Democrat, Republican, or otherwise, can file any bill that fits this call. And by fit, what I mean is the bill has to be drafted such that this call, as drafted and submitted by the governor yesterday, whatever initiative they want to file and have considered has to fall within the parameters that have been set forth in this call. Now, some obvious things, gun controls such as an assault weapons ban or a high-capacity magazine ban, that will not fit the call. This call will not accommodate those types of bills. Really, the only thing, and I'm not an attorney, but as it's been explained to me by the attorneys that I work with, the only thing that has anything to do with guns is going to be item number 12 in the call, which is the temporary mental health order of protection bill. And that bill, again, I really don't think has any chance of passing. Everything else in there has to do with other aspects of public safety.
Do you think there is a Republican in the General Assembly that will carry the legislation? I mean, if it's not in the governor's initiative, right, it's going to take a member of the General Assembly to bring it up.
File it of their own initiative. Exactly.
And I want to read point 12 real quick to make sure folks understand what we're talking about. There are 18 separate points in the governor's call to be potentially addressed in the special session. Point 12, temporary mental health orders of protection, which must be initiated by law enforcement, must require due process hearing, must require the respondent to undergo an assessment for suicidal or homicidal ideation, must require law enforcement to prove its case by clear and convincing evidence, must require that an order of protection be reevaluated at least every 180 days, and must not permit ex parte orders. That's pretty structured. That's pretty specific.
Very specific. And that's important because there are states out there, And again, today, Tennessee, and I don't see it happening anytime in the foreseeable future, is not going to pass an order of protection bill that results in you being dispossessed of your Second Amendment rights when you haven't committed a crime. That's how I define kind of red flag law. And to me, this rises to that. And it's why I cannot support it. However, there are states like California and some other left-leaning states that have order of protection laws on the books that are ex parte. What that means is someone can make an accusation about you, go to court, and tell the judge all kinds of things that aren't true about you, and that results in an order of protection that ends up with your guns being taken away. That's considered ex parte because you didn't even get a chance to defend yourself. The governor's being very clear that he would like an order of protection bill introduced, but it must include due process. I can't support it either way, but that's why that language is so specific.
I want to ask you a question about the structure of the special session and what we expect to be going on outside. I do want to get more into details about what you support and what you are most excited about tackling in the special session. But a question was brought to me, and I think it's a very good one. We hear a lot about outsiders coming into the state of Tennessee, utilizing this to create a national platform for their effort to diminish Second Amendment rights, gun ownership rights across the country, not just in Tennessee. We hear a lot about that. And I expect that they will be here in mass. That is not a reason not to have a special session, and I've expressed my opinion. I think you agree with it.
I do.
So is there a way for you to separate invested Tennesseans getting into the chamber versus individuals from other parts of the country getting into the chamber? In other words, I know that I believe I'm right, that it's a first come, first serve opportunity.
That's correct.
Is there a way to say, hey, we want to make sure that Tennesseans get to see their government in action first, and we're going to prioritize Tennesseans above people from other parts of the country?
I would support that 1,000% because I think it is the right thing to do. I'm concerned about Tennesseans and what they think, even if I disagree with them, more so than I am someone who's being bussed in here by George Soros from California or Illinois or New York. The issue, and it has come up, and I won't say this with great legal authority, but there are issues when you make a building accessible to the public to exclude certain people versus others based on from where they hail. But I would support that 1,000%. I just don't know if it's plausible.
It would be something to look into from a legal standpoint, and I get what you're saying because it creates another dynamic of security, right? Where you're expecting that not only will security make sure that people aren't bringing bad things into the building, but they also are the right people coming into the building. And now we're checking IDs and we're doing all these sorts of things. I understand logistically it's difficult. It was just a thought that was brought to me, and I thought it merited asking you about.
Yeah, and by the way, we used to check IDs when people came into Legislative Plaza, where we used to office, and into the Capitol, and I think they're considering doing that again. Not to say that they're going to keep someone from out of state from coming in, but I do think it's important that we know the identity of the people coming in.
While we're addressing it, are you comfortable with everything? I mean, I'm certain that you, along with Cameron Sexton over in the House side, have been in consultation with the security apparatus at the Capitol. I'm certain you're confident that they've got all of that handled.
I have absolute confidence and faith in our Tennessee troopers, our state troopers that do an amazing job of protecting the Capitol. If necessary, I've been there when we had National Guard troops on standby to protect the Capitol. But no matter who it is, protesters are not going to keep us from conducting the people's business.
Many Democrats in the minority have already declared this special session a failure. I heard the Justin Jones, Gloria Johnson, who I think is attempting to parlay this into some sort of Senate run so that she can get destroyed by Marsha Blackburn next year. But, what is your response to their declaration that the governor has already – I think Jones said that the governor has already conceded to the radical right-wing Republicans on this special session? What's your response?
Well, I would say the governor's done exactly what he said he was going to do. He has been very consistent in saying he wants a special session to deal with public safety. He's also been very consistent in saying he supports an order of protection bill. I can't support his order of protection bill, and I think it has zero chance of passing. But he has never said that this is a gun control session. He's never once said that he supports banning weapons or creating additional impediments to law-abiding citizens from being able to obtain weapons. Anything that we would consider an infringement upon Second Amendment rights. So, no, I think the governor's been very consistent, even though I've disagreed with him about elements of the special session and so forth. But I think he's been very consistent in what he's talked about.
Senate Majority Leader Jack Johnson with us. I will ask Jack after the break what items draws his eye. What does he think should be the priority in a special session coming up on August 21st? We'll do that next. It's 1:20 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Super Talk 99.7 WTN, Matt Murphy and you, and Senator Jack Johnson. If you have any questions for the Senate Majority Leader, now's the time to throw them in there. 615-737-9986. 615-737-WWTN. I do appreciate your participation, and if you've got a call then or a question, then now's the time to get it in. Jack, what on this call are you focusing in on? There's a lot to digest. What, if anything, do you believe ought to be prioritized in the special session?
Well, I'll start with, and these are in no particular order because I think these are all important priorities, but certainly the TBI report relative to human trafficking that I heard parts of your interview with Aaron Goldbertson from Tennessee Faith and Freedom. That's certainly something that I think is important. We're talking public safety, and certainly the human trafficking epidemic that we have in our state and our nation is a big part of that. If we're going to talk about protecting kids, how about kids that are being trafficked for sexual exposure and human trafficking and smuggling and so forth. The other thing, and we've talked about this before on your show, but it's when we're talking about public safety, we have to address mental health. We have to address access to mental health treatment, and that's going to be, I think, a big part of the conversation. And I'm looking for the line here on the call. But effectively, what the governor is going to ask us to do is to apply for a waiver through our TennCare program for additional funding for mental health providers. We are reimbursing. Here's an interesting tidbit that your listening audience might find interesting. Of those people that are receiving mental health treatment in the state of Tennessee, over 50% of them are on our TennCare population, meaning that's our Medicaid program. Mm-hmm. Kind of makes sense. These are people probably struggling to keep a job, be productive members of society, and so they fall into eligibility for TennCare. We are reimbursing providers through our TennCare program at 80 cents on the dollar. That is shameful. And not only should we be reimbursing at least at cost, but it probably needs to be even more than that. So I think the mental health aspect of it is something that I take a particular interest in.
I think you can tell a lot about a relationship, whether it be two friends, colleagues, or a lawmaker and a talk show host, not when they agree, but when they disagree mildly on certain things. You and I had a conversation about eliminating sales taxes on gun safes.
And you won.
Is that going to be back?
Yeah, it's in here. It's in the call. Absolutely.
And you said, and look, I appreciated what you said, that we are a state that relies primarily on sales taxes and other other forms of taxation. And by the way, if I can, just a quick aside, y'all understand where you live. And I got a reminder of where we live and how good it is in the state of Tennessee. I'm not just here to shine the state of Tennessee and to say everything's rosy and wonderful, but I had to re-register my truck, get my new license plate in Wilson County. I was in Davidson County for the first year that I was here when I had a new plate. And I went to the Wilson County tag office. And I got a nice truck. It's a nice GMC. In the state, all I can tell you folks is this. In the state of Alabama, my Ford F-150 was costing me roughly $280 a year. You know how much it cost me to register my GMC?
Somewhere around $50.
$31.50. And you know what I did? And this is me, right? Is this right? I said, is this right? She goes, yes, sir. I was like, well, thank you very much. So that to say, kudos for you guys for keeping our taxation low. Thank you.
Yes. Well, here it is in the governor's initiative. So we have the call, which has been issued by the governor. Then we have his specific initiatives. But number 7 on that list, promoting safe storage, eliminates taxes on firearm safes and safety devices, provides free gun locks, expands safe storage training and state-approved safety courses. So you took us to task for eliminating the sales tax on gun safes back at the end of session, and the governor's proposing, and it hadn't been passed, but I will certainly support it. The governor's proposing that we make that permanent.
Can we mark this, Bell? The Senate Majority Leader just said I won that argument, which is it doesn't happen often and never with my wife, and not often with a politician. But
he looks a little woozy.
There you go. I asked this question, and I don't know if there's any more specific any more specific information on it. But we talk about school safety planning. And that was number 2 on the governor's call. Number 1, mental health resources, providers, commitments, and services. Number 2, school safety plans or policies. We live here we're sitting here in Davidson County. I know you're down in Williamson. I'm over in Wilson. In Davidson County, it's been much discussed that for whatever reason, and we can't get her on to talk about it, Dr. Battle has decided that she does not care for the concept of SROs in elementary schools. She's well on record stating that. Chief John Drake of the Metro Nashville Police Department, although the state provided the funding to spend specifically on these SROs, has said, well, we don't feel like we can do that. We're not going to take the money because we've only got 12 months. And I won't drag you into that argument because I think it's specious. Is it time for the state? I know y'all are loath to take over local rule. Is it time for the state to look at passing legislation requiring SROs in all of our public schools?
I think we have to look at it. And you bring up a good point. Anytime we do something like that, whether it's reducing the size of the Metro Council, whether it's restructuring the Airport Authority Board, that these things do get litigated and they're constitutional issues. However, from a philosophical standpoint, absolutely. There's no excuse for every elementary school in Nashville to not have a school resource
because
officer.
Not to interrupt you, but the excuse long was we can't afford it.
Right.
And you took away that by providing money from the state, and they're still saying they can't do it.
We will pay for it. And this comes from personal experience. I have 3 kids that all went K through 12 in Williams County. They had an SRO in their school every day that they were there, from kindergarten all the way through high school. And they loved their SRO. The school resource officers do so much for that school community. And it breaks down barriers between people who may otherwise have fear of law enforcement and builds that bonding relationship. These school resource officers provide such a valuable service, including providing a level of security, armed security on premises, which is very important. But they do so much more in these school communities. So I would absolutely support that. I'd have to confer with our legal counsel about the constitutionality of it, but there's no excuse for Nashville or any community in the state of Tennessee, a public school setting, to say we're not going to have a school resource officer.
I think we understand better now the way that the political left thinks about this issue since we had Senator Heidi Campbell on. In her run for mayor, she came on with us and answered the question, and I think she inadvertently allowed us into the thinking of someone that's a little left of center on this. She called having SROs in public schools militarizing.
Yes, that's a term they have used many times, which is baffling to me.
It's ridiculous. If there's you spoke to it a minute ago, if there's a perception within communities that the police are bad guys, then we don't need to agree with that perception. We need to figure out why it exists and try to do everything we can to break that perception down and to help youngsters understand police are the good guys that are there to help you and to serve the public.
Absolutely. And again, I speak from experience with this with all 3 of my kids, that I remember showing up to drop the kids off at school, and the SRO is out there and he's high-fiving the kids, or she is, and she or she is giving them hugs, and they were just such an incredible part of that community and did such amazing. It came up during committee when we were passing this legislation. I sponsored the legislation to put the SROs in every public school, and a Democrat on one of the committees spoke to this issue of militarizing the schools. And I had the Commissioner of Public Safety, Jeff Long, former sheriff of Williamson County. The sheriff is over the SRO program, and I had him come up and testify at some length about the value and benefits of having these SROs in these schools. And he did an amazing job.
Well, plenty more to break down. We'll have you on from time to time. We lean on you during these times. We appreciate you coming on with us and kind of breaking it down from your perspective. And we'll talk again very soon, Jack.
Great. Thanks, Matt.